So here we are with Fall Into the Light, which you just played. The first thing, of course, that I noticed, it's in standard tuning.
Yeah.
And of course, you're pedaling the E, which is cool.
Right.
It's more of a traditional, almost type of a riff, but there are a lot of intricacies that you're doing, which is what I noticed is where you're deciding to clamp it down and where you're starting to accent and open it up and let it blossom.
Right.
And that's really, really the beauty of this particular riff.
That's the key to that whole type of sound. First of all, you know, riff-wise, this is way more straight ahead, especially the opening.
Yeah.
Is very much based on a blues kind of.
Well, it could easily fall in any of Ozzy's catalog.
Right, exactly. So it's very Metallica, Megadeth, kind of, you know, maybe even like Zeppelin-ish, you know, just using that sort of, these passing. So it's like E blues with these little passing notes in there.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's the idea of, again, when to mute, when not to mute.
Right.
Right? So whenever you're doing like the chugging sort of low E, right? So now that's when you want to have that kind of like, you know,
power
and like really, you know, stop short, stop, you know, on a dime kind of gunk gunk. And you're going to get that by, first of all, dialing in the amp. You know, the boogie sounds like no other amp.
Yep.
But so dialing that in to where you have enough gain, where it's not too much gain, where the mids are kind of carved out, and you can kind of get this really chunky sound where it's not going to be woofy when you start to clamp down on the lower E. Right? So, and again, that's the palm muting technique where, and in the in-between notes, you want it to ring. Also, I'm not playing this, you know, like this. I'm not going. You can hear the no personality.
Right.
Right? There's a bit of vibrato.
But it's also more controlled. You are really showing where you're accenting which note and where you're pulling, you know.
Exactly.
It's really cool.
Yeah, so again, this is, you know, might be a simple riff, and you might be learning it, and you might say, well, it doesn't, for some reason, it's not exactly sounding like it. That would be the reason why.
Right.
Now also, there's a couple of other more melodic notes in here, just at the very end here. So it gets out of the blues. Now that part, the key to making that sound heavy is when you're playing the fast tremolo picking, like you want to mute the strings just enough to where you're getting the scrapiness of the pick, right? And then the second part is that when you're choking down on what you have to do is you really bring your palm a lot further away from the bridge, almost to where it sounds like the chord goes sharp. So this E here, it almost is starting to sound like an F. And you have to really sort of press down hard and make it so that it kind of does this slightly sharp sound, and that you get this like, as my friend once aptly described it, the sound of a metal pole being hit against a brick wall. It's like a. So you notice when I'm. Right? If you don't do that, it's just going to sound. Not the same.
Yeah, but you're also being very precise on. It's the right hand, really, where what strings you are drawing forth, and then the other ones that you're really muting.
Right,
it's sort of like, I noticed that you're like, there are some times that you're doing all three strings, and then there's only two at the same time. So you're really, it's a lot of control.
It's a lot of control. It's all about the right hand, and it's all what you want to make speak.
Right.
It's also what you want to have not speak.
Right.
Right. So this is like this is all in the lower three strings.
Yeah.
So these higher three strings, you got to make sure those aren't ringing out. So that's your right hand control.
Right.
What I'll do is I'll take my pinky and I'll kind of just like wrap it around those strings a bit, just so they're not going to ring. See the way it's sort of sitting there? So those are kind of muted that way. The second, now that first beginning part is all in like a 3 feel.
Right.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. What's making it interesting, if you listen to the record, is Mangini did a very Dream Theater-y thing where he changed the drum feel like 3 different times.
Okay.
So even though the riff is staying the same, it's phrased in 3, all of a sudden it's, one time it has a triplet feel, one time it has more of a 4/4 feel, it's crossing over the bar. So that's sort of some interesting things you can do. The other, the next section, which is, it starts with a setup and then it goes into the verse. So the time signature now changes to more of a 5 feel.
Okay.
So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's a bunch of different ways you can phrase that.
Okay.
2 plus 3, 3 plus 2, 4, and then 1 extra at the end.
Right.
And that all changes the whole feel of a riff.
Sure.
With this one, what's going on is that the harmony or the chords that are being emphasized are sort of like jutted out by being not muted, and sort of, I guess the proper way to describe it is almost like just like slapping, like it's like the wrist is kind of very loose and slapping those higher
It's almost as if you're spitting them out in a way, right?
And then going quickly back to muting. Right, so it's like. So the challenge is how, with your right hand, and this will like tie me up, I have to practice this, how you go between like wanting those chords to spit out and really speak, but then quickly going back to muting the strings. And it's kind of like it's a weird mental game, because you can start to feel tension in your wrist or your forearm or your shoulder, and that'll just mess you up, especially when this is going by at a fast tempo.
You're kind of paying attention to that.
It's very physical. Yeah, exactly. So that's the challenge of this.
So are you actually counting in your head as you're doing it, or is it just something that you just hear it?
Initially, I do have to count, because the way that this is phrased, if you listen to the drum setup of it, is a little bit abnormal as far as a 5.
Okay.
So it took me a while to kind of like really get that 5 feel. But once I have it locked in, then I'm just going by the way the chords are accenting. It feels natural. Okay. But yeah, initially I did have to count it for sure. I did a lesson on this on a previous Guitar World video, where I talked about how, when you're playing with a heavy sound, how to get some tonality and chord movement by using 6th intervals. All right, meaning, either like a minor 6 or major 6 to imply a chord. So what I mean is, like, the first chord of that progression is E minor. And what I'm doing is I'm playing the open E, I'm playing the 5th, and then I'm playing the minor 3rd G. So I have an E minor chord. Now, it's not like traditional that or like that, but it's kind of more friendly to having a metal sound. Right?
It's more direct instead of being cloudy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it with distortion, it kind of speaks more. And it's, if you're playing like a lot of notes, like, it's not going to sound as heavy. It's a little bit sort of muddled. But by using those intervals, you can kind of imply what the chord progression is, right? So kind of moves up to over here. So all these chords are going to create different movement, like there's a couple different ways to look at it. Like when I'm playing this, I'm really leaving out the A,
right,
which is the root of the chord. So this little chord here is really implying an A minor, right?
Yeah.
Even though it just sounds like this.
Yeah.
So over the E. I can do diminished chords. It's a little measure of 6 there. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Again, we had that in the other song as well. Yeah. And that's a diminished arpeggio, but making a pattern. And then the second ending actually does an E minor arpeggio. Another measure of 6. Yeah. So the first one ends, and the second one goes to B flat for the chorus. So again, by using the 6 intervals, having the pedal tone for tension, a lot more of a dramatic sound, right? This G minor.
Yeah.
D minor. It's like F. No, what is it? Actually, yeah, that's A minor, and then back to E minor.
Wow.
I even forget what chords I'm applying there. Because, sometimes if you do an interval, it could mean a couple of different things. This could be an A minor right here. Right? But it could also be an F chord. It's just a fun little technique.
There's a lot to it. Right?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But again, in order to get this up to speed, I would suggest sort of mastering the idea of whipping that first chord out,
right?
With a loose wrist action, and then tightening back up, muting to get the in-between notes. Right, that's the key.
Yeah, it really is. It's all in that right hand, right?
It's all in the right hand.
Awesome.
Beautiful.